Palazzo d'Avanzati, a historical building in the center of Florence that mostly goes unnoticed by the average tourist. A 14th century stately home that has had many incarnations. Today, of course, it's a museum. But during the 1400s, it was actually used as a tax collection office. The various Florentines, waiting for their turn to part with their hard-earned cash, would spend the idle time scribbling and doodling little graffiti on the walls. One of these graffiti, though, is particularly telling. On the 26th of April, 1478, Giuliano de' Medici was assassinated in Santa Maria del Fiore, the Duomo. The Medici? Murdered? In the cathedral? How the hell did that happen?
Hold up.
Before we get too far ahead of ourselves...
Wait a minute, cut this shit. Man, what you gonna do now?
What we're gonna do right here is go back.
How far you going back?
Way back. As we go a little something like this. Hit it.
Officially, Florence is a republic. And it has been for 200 years. But it's starting to feel more and more like the Medici family's private feud. Or better yet, Lorenzo the Magnificent's kingdom of wonders, a cultural playground in which to flaunt his wealth, his taste in art, and his power, often at the expense of the other great Florentine dynasties. By 1478, in fact, the Medici had been ruling the city with no legal status for over 40 years. Sinister puppeteers pulling the strings of the state from behind the scenes. Bribery, corruption, intimidation, you name it. Like the big lobbies today, the Medici governed the government without formally being a part of it. And whereas Lorenzo's father Piero and grandfather Cosimo relied on alliances with other families to help steer the ship, Lorenzo changes the tune. It's his way or the highway. And by now most families have accepted that, at least on the surface. But the Pazzi in particular are having serious trouble swallowing the Medici's bitter pills, don't mind the pun. The second richest clan in town, that unlike the Medici, who were essentially just a merchant family with obscure origin, the Pazzi actually had a dynastic pedigree. Looking at their bloodline, we have crusaders and knights, honors and accolades bestowed upon them by the King of France, the crosses on their crest, in fact, a symbol of a family who fought for the Holy Land. But alas, for the Pazzi, Florence is no country for noblemen. This is where capitalism as we know it today was born in its purest, coldest, most brutal and unscrupulous form. What mattered here wasn't the blood running through your veins, but the money running through your accounts, your ability to make more of it, and how you used it once you had it. The Medici were the epitome of this mechanism. Lorenzo, in fact, sees the prosperity and growing political status of the Pazzi as a threat. Systematically, he's been using all his influence over the Florentine government to relegate the Pazzi back to a secondary, if not a tertiary role in the administration of the city. Now, beyond the local tension stirred up by Lorenzo, this type of Machiavellian political scheming is starting to piss off a lot of people internationally. It's all about keeping the balance of power. And when someone tips the scales, he needs to be dealt with, swiftly and brutally. And among those who believe Lorenzo needs to be dealt with, we have none other than the Pope, Sixtus IV, who through textbook nepotism is trying to take over as much of the Italian peninsula as possible by putting his nephews in charge of strategic city-states. And Lorenzo, despite having once been the papal banker, keeps getting in the way. What are you up to?
You'll see.
The King of Naples, Ferdinand of Aragon, who sees Lorenzo's growing power and authority as an obstacle to his own expansionist ambitions in southern Tuscany. The Duke of Urbino, even his old mate, Federico da Montefeltro, the mercenary, who did all his dirty work for him just a few years earlier, is starting to feel that Lorenzo is a thorn in everyone's side.
Oh, hi, Freddy.
Wanker. The Bishop of Pisa.
What's up?
Francesco Salviati. A Florentine, adverse to the Medici and Lorenzo, with close ties to the Pazzi, whose dream is to one day become the Bishop of Florence. Impossible under Lorenzo's watch.
Oh, you bastard.
And of course, the Pazzi themselves, who've already succeeded in replacing the Medici as the new papal bankers, might they also replace them at the helm of the Florentine state? The story of the most dramatic political assassination in the history of the Italian Renaissance can now begin. In the next episode, that is.